Welcome. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Google Workspace Management for Schools, Automation Solutions for Overburdened IT Teams and Educators. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping notes. This session is going to be recorded, and you'll receive the recording in your inbox within a couple of days from now. Also, please check out the handouts tab for downloadable assets that you'll find really useful. For this session, we have a deck of how automation tools like Zenphi can help schools improve their operations. Also, feel free to ask questions using the question section or chat at the bottom of your screen, and we will address them during the Q&A session or at the end of this webinar. Now, let me say a couple of words about today's event organizer. Today's webinar is brought to you by Zenphi, a no-code process automation platform designed specifically for Google Workspace users. At Zenphi, we help educational institutions, among other teams, automate end-to-end workflows with just a few drag and drops. Could be student onboarding, Chromebook logins, or user access management, or even parent-teacher communication. Zenphi allows schools to streamline their operations, reduce manual workload, and focus on what really matters, supporting students and educators alike. So let's jump right in. I'm excited to introduce an incredible lineup of the speakers that we have for today. I'm excited to connect our first speaker, Steve Heaney, our head of sales at Zenphi, who will start us off by exploring the challenges schools face and how automation can help address them. So, hi, Steve. Welcome to the stage. It's all yours.
Welcome, everyone. The use of technology in schools has increased dramatically over the past decade and now forms an integral part of the learning experience. Timely and efficient access to this technology is vital and can have a huge impact on student outcomes. Today, we will be talking to you about some of the common challenges faced by IT teams within education and how, through automation using a tool like Zenphi, these challenges can be easily overcome. We know from many studies that schools report their IT teams are stretched thin, really thin, often with a staggering student to IT staff ratio of 500 to 1 or even higher. In fact, a recent survey by EdTech magazine found that 54% of educational institutions rely on teachers and administrative staff for some level of tech support due to the lack of dedicated IT resources. And yet the demands, they just keep growing. With more online learning, stricter security standards, and the constant need to manage devices and properly onboard and offboard staff and students, the pressure is mounting. Schools are being asked to keep up with it all, often without the support they truly need. It's a constant balancing act, one that becomes harder to manage as these demands continue to grow. When it comes to Google Workspace, many schools rely on overburdened IT teams or even teachers for tech support. There just isn't enough dedicated IT resources to keep up with the admin overhead. The manual and repetitive processes such as managing devices, user accounts, and access is time-consuming, and it wastes a large proportion of an educator's time they could otherwise spend with students. Ensuring data privacy and managing user access is critical, especially when we consider the number of students, parents, and teachers moving between classes and in and out of the school. We don't have data specifically for education. However, research shows that over 50% of employees have access to their former employer's data, and they wouldn't hesitate to use it at their new job. Also, a staggering 60% of companies do nothing apart from paperwork to complete the offboarding process of a departing employee. We've got a whole webinar dedicated to this topic, the risks of employees offboarding, and I encourage you to go over there and check it out. Finally, the lack of efficiency, delays in onboarding and offboarding, simple processes like setting up a substitute teacher and making sure that Chromebooks are locked down before students access them. Not having these processes done in a timely manner wastes a lot of valuable time and it holds up the learning process. The answer to all this is, of course, automation. By setting up automated flows, we free teachers and staff of mundane, repetitive processes, putting time back into their day so they can focus on more strategic initiatives. With automation comes increased accuracy, security, and compliance. Ultimately, this leads to more efficient use of technology and better learning outcomes for students. Zenphi is already trusted by many educational institutions worldwide. Today, we're going to hear how Zenphi's automations are being implemented by the New York City Department of Education and explore their perspective on overcoming these challenges that you all face on a daily basis.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve. I didn't come up with any follow-up questions. And as far as I can see, there is nothing in the chat so far. Hopefully, and probably those will appear later. For now, I'm super excited to connect our second speaker for today, Robert Meyer, an automation expert from New York City Susan E. Wagner High School, who promised to share with us today his real-world experience using automation and how different workflows helped him to simplify their life. Hi, Robert. Thanks for joining our webinar today. It's so exciting to hear your personal opinion about automation and how it might help schools and their school staff in their daily operations.
So one of the biggest things I found is really just communication. So I have a perfect example that just occurred last night. So we have parent-teacher conferences today, which are conferences where parents get to speak to the teachers that their child has. And we started a new system, and we wanted to provide a detailed agenda with the appointments scheduled for each teacher. But we had no way of distributing it in an efficient way to each individual teacher. Luckily, I came to the rescue with using Zenphi and with some of the databases that I have already set up. We were able to create PDF files for each teacher's individual appointments and send individual emails out to each teacher. And after the script started running, it took about 40 minutes and every teacher had what they needed to have. So one of the things that I found has been most rewarding using Zenphi is the turnaround time, which comes with the efficiency of it, right? So once you find a script that you need to perform for a certain job or a certain task, it can cut that time in fractional amount of time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for the shout out for Zenphi. Awesome. Really appreciate it. Just again, getting back to the past, I know that you guys started using Zenphi and automation in general when pandemic struck. I mean, like everyone was looking for different options to change their life because everything was so new and unexpected. And I understand that back then, mostly automation was about communication, right? It wasn't that easy to communicate with people being remote now because you couldn't see each other face to face. What about now? It feels like we don't need to communicate anything automatically anymore because we're back to normal, or am I wrong?
No, it definitely has made a shift back to normalcy, I guess, somewhat. For instance, the conferences that we had tonight are still remote, where in the past that used to happen in person. We would be at the school and parents come into the school. But it is getting back to that, is shifting back to there. So yes, that's not been the primary role that I've been using Zenphi for anymore. Now I use it on a daily basis to keep databases up to date. So anybody who's familiar with schools knows that there's a lot of issues, or a lot of laws, I should say, regarding compliance with students who receive special support services, accommodations, and it's very important to have those databases as up to date as possible. So for instance, some of the databases that I keep and I store at our school I used to update on a weekly basis, and it would take me anywhere from an hour to a couple of hours, depending on how much information was needed to be updated. Whereas now it has turned into a matter of seconds, so literally seconds. And not only has it cut the time and work that I need to do in a fraction, but I'm also able to do it more frequently. So instead of being limited to updating those databases that were very important on a weekly basis or bi-weekly, now I'm updating them daily, sometimes multiple times a day, depending on how many changes are occurring. So not only has, like I said, cut or helped improve my efficiency, but also helped make our school more accurate and efficient as a whole. One story that I like to share that it's big with New York City schools is within the past 2 years, we have improved our compliance rate, which is students that are recommended to receive services are actually receiving them. We went from a 46% compliance rate to a 97% compliance rate in a matter of 2 years. And I credit a lot of it to the stuff that I use with Zenphi.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would like just to get your opinion on a different subject. From what we hear, according to multiple reports, schools in general and K-12 and higher education as well, it's not an exception, unfortunately, are terribly understaffed in terms of IT professionals. From what you hear from your colleagues, how easy it is to handle all these IT-related operations if you are not as dedicated IT professional, and how automation with no-code tools can actually help to face this challenge and maybe overcome it in some aspects.
So my position in schools and education is I'm technically a teacher. I started out as a teacher. I was a full-time teacher. Now in the position that I'm in, that's slowly gone away. The reason I mentioned that is because I was not an IT person. I've kind of somehow transitioned into that role because of the stuff that I've been able to produce. But that is not my background. It's not my specialty. However, that is part of the reason that I've started using Zenphi on my journey about a little bit over 2 years ago. And I've stuck with them, and I consider myself loyal to them, and not because I have any affiliation, but just because they make a good product, and they make a product that's easy to use, easy to navigate, easy to learn. So with all that said, as in my background, not being an IT person and seeing the level of growth that I've seen within myself using Zenphi in the short amount of time that I've been using it, that's kind of what was appealing to me. Is it is extremely user-friendly, extremely easy to pick up on, so you do not necessarily have to be an IT person. If you are an IT person, you could, the sky's the limit on probably what you can do. But yeah, so if you are interested in the capabilities and the things that Zenphi might have to offer, I would say you do not have to be intimidated by if you're not an IT person or not. So one example that I can give is there is a teacher who teaches seniors, so students who are potentially graduating, and she likes to give them a type of certificate, but she used to print them out one by one and right there. Oh, hey, is this something that you can help me out with? So I showed her how to set it up, showed her what some of the best practices are. And kind of the thing that I guess maybe ties in a little bit is that after I'm showing her all the steps, before I explained the steps and I kind of showed her the outline and the workflow and the designer, is one of these things like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do this. Are you going to be able to help me with this? Whereas towards the end of our session together, I was like, oh, this was like really easy. And I think I can do this on my own now. So whether it's printing out certificates, whether it's setting up appointments for room reservations, whether it's generating letters for teachers that are going to be absent that we need to provide schedules for, there is at least one task that's being performed by one department or another, whether it's coming from me, whether it's coming from a different department. But there is at least one script or workflow that I have set up that's being run on a daily basis, at least.
Okay, thank you so much. And the final one, what would be your advice to colleagues who would like to start the automation project in their school, but they don't know what to begin with, what to look into, how to structure the approach, maybe how to advocate this project to the seniors, what to start with in general?
I would say what the thing to start off with, if again, if it's a task or if it's something that you find to be getting done repetitively and time consuming, then it can be automated. And if you're not sure of how the automation process would work, and this is kind of how I taught myself a little bit, is I would sit down and think about the steps that I had to do. So at first was, okay, I got to look up parent names. That's step one in the workflow. Then I have to tie the parent to the student. Okay, that's step two. So whether or not you necessarily will be comfortable or know how to apply the Zenphi workflows and scripts, if you can walk through it in your own head, what the steps are with doing the task or the process that you need to do, then it's just a matter of how Zenphi can be translated into that, because you already have the steps. You already know what the workflow is. You just need Zenphi to implement it for you.
Basically, draw a flow chart, right? And then you can take an automation, so that will help you run all the steps you put in there. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today, Robert. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, and I love using the product.
And now to our very hands-on speaker, Fernanda Lopez, Customer Success Engineer at Zenphi. She's going to share with us probably the most exciting part, practical use cases of different processes and how they can be automated using Zenphi platform. Thank you so much for joining us today, Fernanda. Can you walk us very quickly through the processes that you're going to showcase? What automations are we going to see today?
Sure, Anna. Firstly, thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully you find this webinar interesting and helpful. We're going to be going over 4 flows, essentially: offboarding, onboarding your users, as well as being able to lock Chromebooks. This is something that users have been wanting to do but haven't been able to find a solution until now. So now Zenphi allows you to be able to lock Chromebooks into only one device. And then we're also going to be looking into access management, so that you can approve when users have access to certain content.
Awesome, thank you. Let's get started.
And without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on into the first flow of this webinar. We're going to start with our student onboarding flow. You can easily make modifications to this flow to be able to create something very similar, but to onboard your staff, for example. And remember, Zenphi is very customizable, so feel free to add or remove steps to make sure it's perfect for your onboarding needs. Now for the trigger, which in Zenphi, the trigger is the action that actually starts your flow, we're going to select the Zenphi form trigger. This means that whenever a form is submitted, it's going to automatically do all of the steps in the flow. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to be using a Zenphi form. This is the form that I'll be using. You can add different questions if you desire. You can also swap it for a Google form, for example. Now, what steps do I have in this process? Firstly, I'm just calculating today's date to be able to log that as when it was submitted, in case you need to log that information somewhere. It's very useful to have. And then I'm going to calculate when their orientation will be held. In this case, this action allows you to be able to add certain time to a date. So I'm just adding 7 days to the current date. That way we can hold their orientation meeting. We have an action that allows you to create their password. So you can easily create their password with this action. You can choose the length. You can also include numbers, special characters. So it's very, very simple. And now the star of the show is this action called create user. You're going to be able to see that it's very simple to be able to create the Google account for a user in just a few easy steps. You can use dynamic data coming from your form to be able to automate the process. So here we're creating their email. Here you can customize depending on your domain. You can choose the password that we just created, and you can also add any other information, like if you want to add their cell phone, if you want to change password at next login, also add a recovery email, any notes. And there's many different fields that you can choose from, so feel free to add as many as you want. Like previously mentioned, I'm adding everything to a backlog to keep track of all of the submissions. So with this action, I'm able to add it to my Zenphi table. I can choose which value belongs to which field, and here we have our Zenphi table, which is going to be receiving all of the information that comes from the form. Next, we're going to go ahead and add the user to a student group. So we have an add to group action. All you have to do is indicate the group key, which you can find in your Google directory. You can also use the group's email address, group alias, or the group ID. Here we're going to choose the email address that we just created, and you can also choose if the member should be a member, manager, or owner, and you can choose which emails they should receive as well. Since for this example we're going to be hosting an orientation meeting, we want to make sure that we set up that calendar event. It's as easy as selecting the Create Calendar Event action. All you have to do is choose the email, choose the calendar you want to add, and then you can add a subject, a description. You can also add a location. Here you're able to add any attendees, the time zone, as well as even create a Google Meet link. The last step that we have here is just a welcome email for the student. So in my form, I have requested them to add their personal email, so I'll be sending all of this information there. In this email, we're going to be setting it up with our Gmail connection, and then you're able to select who's going to be receiving the email. You can also edit the sender display name, the subject, and body. So here I'm going to be adding all of the important information, like the email that they're going to be using, as well as their password. I've also indicated when they're going to have their orientation, and that they'll be able to find that in their Google Calendar. And like mentioned at the beginning, feel free to add or remove any steps if they aren't necessary to your process. You may want to add them to a shared drive as well, maybe notify the teacher or add them to a Google Classroom. So the possibilities are really endless. Now let's go ahead and move on to the offboarding flow. Moving on to the offboarding portion of the webinar, we're also going to be starting with a Zenphi form. One of the main perks of Zenphi forms is it allows us to be able to pull information from Zenphi tables. Now, if we remember from the first portion, we created a backlog of all of the different students. Now, why am I mentioning this? Since we already have a table of all of the students, we can insert information into our form. What do I mean by this? That we're easily able to select which student we want to offboard by selecting them in the form. So now moving on to the steps in our flow, the first one is to be able to pull all of the information from the table. Now that we know which student they selected, we can easily have access to all of the different columns. Then we want to make sure that we get the secretary's approval to make sure that the offboarding process is approved. So we're going to be using an assign task action, this task. And then we want to make sure that we get the secretary's approval before moving on to the offboarding process. So you can set up the task in any way you want. You can add different outcomes, add a sender display name, and you can customize the bodies. Here I'm just giving some information on the student and the reason for offboarding. And then we're able to customize the logic in the flow to be able to decide which direction the flow should take depending on their selection. So if they reject the offboarding process, we're going to be sending an email to the person who filled out the form, letting them know that it wasn't approved. And there's also a section in the task to be able to add comments in case they're able to resubmit their request. However, if the offboarding process was approved, we have a couple of steps that we need to take. So firstly, we want to suspend the user. So we have a suspend user action. Here you can decide if you want to suspend or archive as well. All you have to do is indicate their email. We're going to be able to create a password. That way we can change their password and avoid the user from trying to log in again. So we're going to change their password and their recovery info using the update user action. So you can choose different parameters if you want to update more information as well. That's also an option. There's many different ones that you can choose from. We're going to delete them from any groups that they currently are in. So all you have to do is indicate the group key. So you can either use the email address, the group alias, or the unique group ID. Now that we've removed them from all of the groups, we can go ahead and archive the user. So we're going to use the suspend user action once again, and this time we're going to suspend and archive and notify the requester that we've gone ahead and done all the previous steps. So this is a send email action. It allows you to send emails on behalf of your Gmail account. So here you're able to customize the email in whichever way you want. And I've also indicated the new password in case they need to access their account at any moment. Before going ahead and deleting the user and removing them from the backlog that we've created, I want to make sure that we give a grace period to the user, which I have indicated in the previous email. So I've indicated that they have 10 days to be able to access any information they may need before they're deleted. So we're going to give them 10 days by using the pause action. Here you can change the duration. And then after those 10 days have completed, we're going to go ahead and delete the user. After it's been deleted, we're also going to go ahead and remove them from our Zenphi table or backlog using the delete record action. And just like that, you've offboarded your student in just a couple of steps.
Thank you so much, Fernanda, for these two amazing workflows. The automations that you showed are very helpful and insightful. I just have a bunch of questions to ask. So regarding the onboarding and offboarding, both of the flows that we've seen, are those flows relevant just for the students onboarding and offboarding? Or can they be also used to automate onboarding and offboarding of the school staff as well?
You can totally make the modifications necessary to be able to onboard your staff. For example, if they have certain Google groups, there may be a certain mailbox that they need to be added to, you can easily modify this. All you have to do is maybe change the group keys, add different actions. If you want to add them, for example, to Slack, or maybe post a message on LinkedIn, you can do this easily.
Perfect, thank you. And just another one. I was wondering, during the onboarding process, can we also provide automated access to the third-party tools and solutions based, I don't know, on the student's grade or, for example, employee's role, like so-called role-based access management? And obviously, at the same time, can we make sure that this is removed during the offboarding flow?
Yes, you would be able to grant access to all of these during onboarding. Zenphi does have a couple actions that come out of the box that you can use. For example, like we mentioned previously, we have Slack, you have Google Groups, you have your Gmail. However, if there's another platform that you use to be able to communicate with your staff, with your students, you can easily onboard and offboard them if there's APIs available that you can use to be able to grant or remove this access.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see the other flows that we are going to automate today.
Now the use case that most of you are probably here for, we're going to be going over how you can create a one-to-one policy for your Chromebooks, being able to lock down a Chromebook to ensure that it's only able to be used by one Google account. This has been requested by GAM users for a very, very long time, and previously there was no other solution that could be taken until now Zenphi has found a solution. This is something that's not only going to enhance security inside of your education workspace, but also make sure that you're not paying more repairs than you have to, since now students will have to take care of their own computers at all time. This flow is going to be kicked off whenever a call is made to your asset management system. So whenever a device is added and assigned, it's going to automatically kickstart this flow. Now, what this system is going to send over is the device ID as well as the Google account that it was assigned to. Here for easy access, we're just setting the run name as the Google account. That way you can easily see which run belongs to which account. Now, the solution that Zenphi found is creating an OU for each one of the students and then assigning the device to that OU. So we're going to go ahead and create the student OU. So we're going to use the create organizational unit. We're going to use the Google account that was sent over by our trigger since this was kicked off by a different system. You are going to need an OAuth token. So we're going to make sure to use this action to be able to redeem it. If you don't see this action available in your workspace, don't worry. All you have to do is reach out to anyone from our team and they'll be able to enable the action for you. And now, like mentioned, we're going to move the device to the OU that we just created. To do this, we're going to use our make HTTP request action. making it really easy to be able to make the call and use this method. So this is a Move Devices to OU method that is provided by Google API. So all we have to do is pass over the token that we just created, and then we're going to also pass over the ID that was provided in our trigger. And what do we have so far in our flow? So what we've done is created an OU for the Google account. We've moved the device that we just assigned to that OU. Now all we have to do is establish the rule to be able to make sure that that device can only be used by that Google account. So to do that, we're going to use another HTTP request. We're going to use a different method. This one is called orgunit batch modify, and it's going to allow us to be able to establish this one-to-one policy. So if we look at the bottom, there's a space that's called user allow list. So this is a list of users that are allowed to be able to make use of the OU. So we want to make sure that we're only setting this Google account, which is going to come from our trigger, and anyone else is going to be restricted. And just like that, in 4 easy steps, we've made sure that whenever a device is assigned by the asset management system, it'll automatically be locked down to a singular Google account. And this will not only result in savings of thousands and thousands of dollars, but also some added security as well. Now moving on to our last flow, this is a very simple access provisioning flow that you can use for your teachers. However, you can also modify it to be able to grant access to certain content to students or even other staff members. So our first action is going to be our trigger, which is a Google form trigger. We're going to be using this simple form. We're going to be asking for their email address, the access level required, the grade they're currently teaching, as well as they require to be admins. So in some schools, the computer teacher is also the IT admin, so they may need extra privileges that a regular teacher wouldn't need. So what this flow is going to allow you to do is to grant permission only to the content that they should be seeing to be able to ensure data security. So our first step is going to be to look up the coordinator of the teacher that submitted the form. So this action is called Find Manager. It allows us to be able to get all of their information. We can get their email. We can get things like their full name, so we can easily create an email that is catered to the user. And now that we have the coordinator's information, we want to make sure that we get their approval before we grant access to make sure that this is actually approved. So we're going to use the Assign Task action. Here you can edit the task name, description, and then depending on if they approve or reject, if they reject, we're going to want to send them an email saying that the request has been denied. Here you can add as much information as you want. And then if they do approve, we're going to want to see first if they need admin privileges. If they do, we're going to want to set them as Google admins. You can do so with the Update User to Admin action. And then depending on the grade that they're currently teaching, we want to share the correct drive with them. So to do that, we're going to use a switch by value. What this is going to do is it's going to get the input from the grade, and depending on what they select, it's going to share a different drive. So all you have to do is use the add member to share drive, and you're going to add the drive ID for the specific group. So for example, here you would add the drive ID for the 6th grade share drive, and you would add the 7th grade drive ID to this branch and 8th grade for this branch. And once that has been completed, we're going to go ahead and send the initiator an email letting them know that this request has been completed and their access has been granted. Feel free to add or remove any steps in this process. You can add them to different groups, you can share more drives with them, you can also share specific files, and you can add everything to a backlog so you know exactly what content each user has access to, and this way you can easily remove access if needed at any point in time.
And thank you so much, Fernanda. It was super helpful and insightful, and I'm really hoping you'll be joining us for the next webinar episodes.
Thank you for having me, Anna, and I'm looking forward to also hearing back feedback from our viewers to see what they want to see in our next webinar.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you find this session valuable and inspiring as you explore how automation can transform your school's operation now and in future. We will address to the couple of questions that I can see in the chat right now shortly by connecting with you guys via email. And yeah, thank you once again. If you have any questions on top of those that have already been posted in the chat, Or if you want to get started with Zenphi, don't hesitate to visit our website and reach out to us at success@zenphi.com. Also, we'll be in touch connecting you with our regional automation experts, and you can address all the questions you have to them. They would be happy to support you on every step of your automation journey and help you achieve maximum productivity and efficiency with the resources you have at hand, no matter how limited they are. Thank you so much once again, and hope to see you at our future events.